Welcome to the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network, the podcast 10 for 10, which brings you the week's top 10 compliance stories curated together in one podcast each week. Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, brings you the compliance professional stories you need to be aware of at the end of your busy week. Sit back and in 10 minutes, hear about the stories every compliance professional should be aware of. Every Saturday, 10 for 10 highlights the most important news, insights, and analysis for the compliance professional, all curated by the voice of compliance, Tom Fox. Get your weekly filling of compliance stories with 10 for 10. Hosted by Tom Fox. 10 for 10 is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. First, a word from the sponsor of the Compliance Podcast Network for this month, Ethico.
In the intricate world of ethics and compliance, each second is precious, and slow case closures are more than just delays, they're missed opportunities. Enter Ethico. Our solution revolutionizes case management, cutting closure times in half and turning every challenge into a chance for improvement. Imagine a workspace where efficiency and compliance coexist harmoniously. Don't just dream of faster resolutions, make it your reality. Visit ethico.com/CPN today to book a demo and dive into our exclusive white paper by Tom Fox, the ROI of Compliance, and to try our free ROI calculator. Empower your team with the tools they deserve.
10 for 10 for the week ending April 27, 2024. Our first story comes to us from the Financial Post, which reports that a former SNC Lavalin executive was sentenced to a prison term in a bridge bribery case in Canada. The individual, Norman Morin, once a high-ranking VP at the engineering firm, received the sentence for his conviction for corruption and fraud last month. The company paid roughly $2.3 million in order to secure a $128 million contract back in the early 2000s. Next up, from the Wall Street Journal, Risk and Compliance Journal, Dylan Tokar reporting that federal prosecutors unsealed a years-old indictment charging 10 people with operating a scheme to evade U.S. sanctions on Venezuela's state-controlled oil company, PdVSA. The indictment follows the arrest of several, or at least one person, and involved attempts to procure aircraft parts, including turbofans for PdVSA's aircraft fleet. Next up, from the New York Times, it reports that McKinsey is now under investigation for its role in fueling the opioid crisis. And when I say fueling, I meant turbocharging the sale of painkillers like Oxycontin. The investigation is led by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts and the Western District of Virginia. In 2021, McKinsey agreed to pay about $1 billion to settle investigations related to the firm's opioid makers. And the investigation has been underway for several years. Federal prosecutors are also looking into whether McKinsey obstructed justice in its records handling. Next up, from CNN, the first of multiple reports of wide-ranging corruption arrests in Russia regarding the Russian military, as a deputy was arrested and summarily cashiered from the army for his role in corruption. The Russian Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov was arrested on suspicion of accepting a bribe. And finally, the Gupta brothers. Yes, those who were involved in the bribery and corruption in South Africa are back in the news as the South African government is putting on intense and increased pressure on the UAE to extradite the two brothers to South Africa to stand trial for their alleged crimes in the state takeover endeavors that they made under former President Zuma. Next up from Bloomberg, the United States wants a 3-year sentence for disgraced and former Binance CEO CZ for his role in the massive fraud, corruption, and money laundering case that the U.S. settled with Binance earlier this year. A $4 billion criminal penalty was filed by Binance, and now they want the CEO to be sentenced to jail time. The CEO's attorneys have countered that probation is appropriate because he's sorry he did it. So I suspect the judge will give him a year or two, but for $4 billion, not too bad. Next up from the Financial Times, the UK Serious Fraud Office has launched a review of its past and present cases after uncovering problems with crucial software used in evidence disclosure, marking the latest blow to the UK anti-corruption prosecutor. The agency opened the review after an internal memo flagged problems with a disclosure tool during its investigation into London mining. In a statement, the SFSO was informing all defendants in all affected cases about the issue, which affected the SFO's ability to search for relevant terms and evidence. The SFO said it has identified a fix for the problem. Next up, in a press release, the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, announced it was banning non-competes. In a ruling that was cheered literally by every employee across the United States, the FTC said that non-competes keep wages artificially low, innovate or suppress innovation and new ideas, and rob the U.S. economy of more than 8,500 startups that could be created every year once non-competes are banned. The FTC's rule to ban non-competes will ensure that every American will have the freedom to pursue a new job, start a new business, or even bring a new idea to the market. So this is an exploitative tactic used by corporations imposing contractual conditions that prevent workers from taking a new job or starting a new business. And they often force workers to either stay in a job they want to leave or bear other significant harms and costs, such as being forced to switch to a lower playing field, being forced to relocate, or being forced to leave the workforce altogether. Of course, employers are actually screaming bloody murder over this, but the reality is that when pizza joints make workers sign non-competes, you see the invidiousness of them going forward. Of course, there will be a lawsuit or two over this. Next up, from the Wall Street Journal, once again, Risk and Compliance Journal, Dylan Tokar also reporting that real estate agents are chafing at new anti-money laundering rules. They claim they're not for money laundering, but they don't want to participate in FinCEN and Department of Treasury's anti-money laundering efforts, as they don't want to report in on the source of money for the purchases of houses. Anyone who has the cash to purchase $1 million house, obviously that should be a suspicious transaction and it should be reported. Yet, real estate agents claim that it will cost them too much money and cost them too much time to fulfill the rules that literally every other cash dealing business has to follow. So I doubt the real estate agents will win this battle, but I'm sure they will sue as well. And finally, we come to Boeing. And however, this time we're going to talk about the families of the victims of the two 737 MAX crashes. Now, of course, Boeing spent a long time denying liability before settling with the families. And then they fought the DPA as well, and the families wanted more input and oversight for Boeing. Well, now they want the Department of Justice to bring criminal penalties against Boeing for their actions in 2024. This is a very powerful argument by a group of victims who were frankly diminished by the entire process, as the court noted in ruling on the efficiency of the DPA. As I mentioned at the start of this podcast, this month's sponsor for the entire Compliance Podcast Network is Ethico. Have you ever wondered how to show the ROI of your compliance program? Have you struggled with the budgeting process, getting the funds you want for your compliance program? Well, I've partnered with Ethico to put together a white paper on the ROI of compliance, which shows you not only how to demonstrate ROI, but also how to speak finance when you're sitting across from the CFO with your budget proposals. Check out the website and get the white paper. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of 10 for 10. I hope you'll check out the newest podcast in the Compliance Podcast Network, the Compliance Tip of the Day. In Compliance Tip of the Day, I give a 5 to 8 minute summary of one tip that you can integrate into your compliance program or put together for greater compliance program efficiency.